you have to know that this is the person for you, and you need to know for yourself that God said this is your partner, because there will be times once you are married where
Mhm.
you feel like, what is like
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
what really are going here? Like, feel like, is this really the person for me? Did I make a
Yep.
mistake? And I
Yep.
know you felt that way, and I felt that way before, is because we've had those conversations where I'm
Mhm.
like, this is the ghetto. Like, what is this, right?
Mhm.
But we
Where you scream and shout.
Yes, exactly. We've had those seasons where there's literally the first few years of our marriage, babe, let's be so for real. We almost didn't make it.
Yeah.
We almost
Yeah.
didn't make it. Like, let's just be so for real. I threw out the D word a few times. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't think I can do this anymore.
I think it was we were 3 months into the marriage.
Yes, and I was like,
You
I can't
were
do this.
and you were we got into a disagreement
Yeah,
over something so stupid.
yeah.
And the first thing that came out of your mouth was the word divorce.
Divorce. Yeah,
And you had already known how I feel about that
yeah,
word because that's one thing I said our marriage would never end up in.
yeah. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Salt and Seasons podcast. My name is Shimona Kizito, and if you are new here, baby, welcome. You are not here coincidentally, and you definitely are not here by chance. You have landed here intentionally. If you have been rocking with your girl and use a seasoned salt shaker, welcome back. I hope y'all have been good. I am so hyped for today's episode because clearly I have a very special guest with me today, and that is my husband. That's my boo thing. I call him my scrum diddly shiz. This is my husband, Ivan. Welcome, Ivan. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
having me.
Thank you, babe. I'm so hyped for this episode. This is something that people have actually been asking for. So we're giving the people them what they want. People have been asking for us to do a little couples episode to talk about our relationship and talk about our journey. We've been married for 3 years. We're going on to our 4th year of marriage this June. So anniversary is coming up, but this is something that the people them have been asking for, because our journey and our walk into getting to this point of, walking in a God-centered relationship and being in the perfect will of God in this relationship has been very interesting. It has been anything but traditional. It has been anything than like what I have known to be like a common cookie cutter Christian relationship. Our journey has been it's been a journey. So we're going to be diving into all of that today, just talking about what our journey has looked like, what are some of like the key things that we have learned in this journey so far, and like some of the decisions that we have to make to lay down things. Because when I met Ivan, like I was heavily in the world, he was heavily in the world, and now we're both like fully submitted to Christ, fully walking with Christ. So we're gonna talk about what that journey has looked like, and just go from there. So I'll let you start because you're the one who slid in my DMs. So take the stage, baby. And so like when you like what season were you in at that time? Because it was December 2016. I remember very clearly. I know my dates, so don't play with me. I know my dates. It was December 2016 when you messaged me on the ground. So I just want to hear about like where your mindset was at, what season you were in, and yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, at the time I think I had been out of a toxic relationship at the time, and really relationships was the last thing on my mind. When I slid in your DMs, I just saw this fine thing, and really, um, I had no ill intentions. I was just trying to make friends, just live life, and do what single men do at the time,
Mm,
obviously. And yeah, that was really it for me.
yeah. So so I was just like a, a little thing that you were just like, she's, a little girl, like a little fine girl. Let me just see what's going here. That's what it was. That was the tip that you were on at that time.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
And so he hit me up. You slid in my DMs. I remember at first I was like, honestly, y'all, I was not interested. I was just like, no. He asked for my digits, and I was like, no, I'm good. Just like I had no. The season that I was in at the time, I was in a toxic relationship. Like he had just come out of a toxic relationship, and I was like coming out of a toxic relationship in the sense of like lease was ending. We were just like on that. We were just had broken up, like, and things were coming out of that season. So I was in my party gal era. I was in like ready to live my best life era, because that relationship that I was coming out of, I had been in for like a very long time. I think like 6.5 years. I
Mhm.
had been with him since I was 17. So had just been coming out of that toxic long relationship, the only relationship that I had been in. And here comes, this fine man sliding in my DMs, but I'm just like, I'm good. Like, I really wasn't interested. But then you kept coming coming back, even though I turned you away. It was perseverance, and that's what made me open up to you to begin with. It was your perseverance. You were very consistent. So even if you were just looking for a little ting-a-ling, like you were still very consistent in that. Um, and so from there, eventually we started talking for more. And then next thing you know, I was in your crib. I don't even know how long it took for us to take it from there to that. I think it was just a few weeks,
I
huh?
think part of what what I think my motivating factor actually was the fact when I slid in your DMs and I asked you for your number. The way I approached it, I had never done it that way before. I usually had a strategic plan when I go into girls'
Not a
DMs to
plan.
ask for. I had a system, a way to ask for those
A
numbers,
system is crazy. He's a true
right?
apostle because the fact
So,
that you had a system for that is crazy.
but when it came to you, I remember right away. I said, "Hi, you got a number I can reach you at." I had never done that
Yeah,
before,
yeah,
right? Usually I ask, "How you doing? How's your day going?" kind of thing, which will then in turn give me an opportunity to ask for the number,
yeah.
right? At the time, I didn't want to waste nobody's time. I didn't want to waste my time. I ain't got time for all of that. So for no conversations, it's really you either give me your number or you don't.
Yeah.
But I think your response at the time was actually you gotta come correct.
Period, ladies.
so so you hit me with that. So I'm like, okay, it ain't really all like that. So I went back to my system that had always worked, right?
That system is
I
crazy.
asked you at that point what I usually I don't go ask for numbers. I usually ask, do you have a contact I can reach you at? Gentlemen, that's a polite way to ask ladies for their number. In that extent, you had two options. You could either give me your Gmail, you
Please.
could always give me you could give me your number, you could give me your Instagram handle, whatever it is. I asked for your contact.
That's
And out
crazy.
of all the contacts you had, in the end of it all, you decided to give me your
After
number.
multiple weeks, it
A
took a little bit
thousand
for me to
percent.
get there, but I got there. So it was
Yeah.
your perseverance that had paid off. And
Yes.
so I remember like he started following me on Snapchat shortly after. And at this time I was working at Sephora. I was a Sephora girly. And so like we were conversing a bit here and there. So the contact lady that I gave him the snap because I said, first of all, come correct. He kept going. I was like, here's my snap. That's what you can get. And so he had saw that I was working at Sephora at the time. And I'll never forget I was working one day and I see a little snap come through, and his snap name was Smooth the Creator. Ask him where he got that nickname. That's a whole other episode. That's how you know this man was in the world. His name was Smooth. They used to call him Smooth. And so Smooth the Creator popped up on my Snapchat and was just like, oh, I'm outside your store. I was like, ain't no way this man just showed up. I go outside in my little Sephora outfit, and there he is. And so from there, that's when I was like, okay, this man is obviously serious. Let me give him a try. And so we started talking, and then the next week I was in his crib in his bed. And that was that. And so obviously things were just more of like
Fun.
we were
Just
having
having
fun.
fun.
It was friends with benefits
Yeah.
at that point. And that
Yeah.
continued on from December 2016 into the new year for some time. But then things started to get a bit more serious and things started to shift. And so I remember when things started to change in our relationship, something you told me is that you would never date a single mom. You always thought you would never date a single mom, and you were catching feelings for this single mom because at the time I had my son and he was like 5 at the time, and so things started to pick up. And I remember Ivan would start being like, "Oh, like, can I meet your kid?" And I was like, "Ain't no way!" Like I just thought a relationship not happening, but he started to open up to that fact. So why did you say that you would never date a single mom? Like, what was your mindset and perspective on that? Because I'm sure there's a lot of men that we
Yeah.
know who are just in that same place, like single moms, nah, not for me, I'm good. So like what made you open up to that? Why did you not even want to explore that? And yeah.
For me, I always had this aspect that there's a bond between the baby father and the
Mm,
mother,
mm,
right? And no matter what you do, no matter what challenges you have, that bond is always going to be there.
mm,
And that bond was my our firstborn,
mm-hmm.
right? So when you look at that, and all I ever had in the back of
First of all,
my
sorry, I
head,
love that you said our firstborn. That's so sweet. Anyways, continue.
all I ever had in the back of my head was the fact that if me and this girl ever argued,
Mm,
the first person she's gonna run back to is her baby father,
mm,
right? So you have all those thoughts going through my head, and I'm like, I'm an outsider, right? So there's really no point in me trying to get into all these feelings and everything. So that was really my approach, and part of that, I think, there was a time I was walking downtown Toronto. And now that I have understanding, I understand there was a little bit of trauma to that. I was walking downtown Toronto, and it was, I think, a busy Caribana weekend. You know, Toronto, they have that festival in the summers, so it was a busy Caribana weekend, and I see this guy in his BMW on Yonge Street. Obviously, we all know how the long weekends get in Toronto, traffic and everything. And I saw this beautiful lady walking with her man. I see this guy hop out the car, blocks up traffic, and just goes, "Hey, you're ignoring my phone calls, blah blah blah. Where's my kids, blah blah blah." So I looked at this, I'm like, damn. That was the first thing I ever saw with that I remembered when I met you, and I said, okay, I'm never gonna date or get serious with a woman that has a child. So that on my part was a trauma aspect, and my response was automatically shutting down women that have kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then what made you open up to it? Because I mean, we were friends with benefits and we were having fun. But I remember at one point in the midst of our fun, you had said that like you looked at me, you're like, if this isn't it, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
And at that point I got scared because me too, like I realized that there was something different about this relationship, even though I wasn't looking for nothing. So what made you realize that? And how did you feel once you realized that, oh my gosh, like I'm really catching feelings for this single mother?
Yeah, I think what changed it for me is part of it, you were always there. We had built a bond, and obviously we all know what happened. More you indulge in sexual intercourse and all of that, I'm always looking for what you're doing. I'm always checking in on you. It went beyond just friends of benefits, right? I think once we kept doing what we were doing, in due time, a bond was being built, right? So what changed it for me in one and know is the fact that for me, I noticed, okay, one, you already pretty much knew almost everything about me. Because if you're really a friend for benefit, you would not know my work hours. You would not know where I work. You would not know who I'm related to. You would not know anything about my past. But I remember as we started building our bond, I started opening up more, even though I did not want to. But something just made me open up, and I started opening up to you more. And as I did that, the bond was getting built.
Yeah. 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 Most definitely. And then so the bond started building more. I don't think we were like officially dating. We were still just like we had very strong feelings for one another. Um, and then throughout that summer, like we became exclusive with kind of out saying. I remember you had gone to Toronto for your it was your brother's graduation, right?
Yeah.
You got to Toronto
My
for your
graduate.
oh, it was your graduation. Sorry, babe. Sorry. You were gone to Toronto for your graduation. My bad, yeah. I was the friends with benefits. I was checking for all that. But I knew somebody graduated. So I remember you had gone for the graduation and then like during that time, um, I didn't call you a few times. I remember you were like, you were not happy with it. You're like, you can't call nobody, you don't know nobody. Like that's how we really doing this. And that's when you came back from that trip and then we went to Sylvan Lake when you had gotten back, I remember that's when we were just like, okay, like no, like this is really it.
Yeah.
But then throughout that same summer, God was doing his own thing in my life. So y'all, if you remember, like during this time, I had just gotten out of like a 7 year toxic relationship. Ivan was at the door knocking when I was walking out the door. So Ivan, he was already there. Like I didn't even have a period to breathe. And so immediately into friends with benefits with Ivan and then just partying and enjoying my single friends with benefits life. And throughout that summer, God was starting to knock on my heart. I remember I would come over to your house and I would start putting on, you remember Elevation Church?
Yeah.
I would come to his house and we'd be watching Stephen Furtick together. And like, I'd be sending him clips from Stephen Furtick on Snapchat. And I started going back to church during that summer as well. I'm just like, yo, let's watch this. And we'd be watching Stephen Furtick and just like enjoying ourselves in that manner. And so God was doing something and tugging at both of our hearts during that time. And so that September, I actually had gone to church and I had given my life to Christ and I was baptized and I was born again. And I gave my life to Christ. And God just began to do like a rapido work in me. And so within a few weeks, I realized that like I started to understand conviction and feel the weight of conviction on my heart for the things that I was doing with Ivan. Like I remember there was one point we were in the middle of doing the deed. And do you remember what happened?
Yeah, you started crying.
Yeah.
So you said, I remember very clearly, you said, I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
And you just started crying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the middle of doing the deed. And so, like, this is what we had been doing for months on end. And then for the first time, once I gave my life to Christ, I was just engaging in what I knew. And I was laying down with my man in bed, and we were in the middle of doing what we are doing. I just started bawling, crying. And I remember you were like, yo, like, what's
Yeah.
going on?
Yeah.
And so that's when God was really doing a work within us. And so it reached the point after a few weeks, I was just like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. I need to be serious in my walk with God. I can't do this.
You broke up.
Yeah. And so
You broke
I
up.
broke up with him
Yeah.
because I was trying to like navigate my walk with
Yeah.
God. And like
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
I grew up in church, and like this was the first time when I was really like
Mm.
ready to just form my own relationship with God. Like I didn't want to just go to church and do things, for the sake of whatever. Like I actually wanted to do this thing with God and do it right. And I was beginning to acknowledge that conviction. So I was like, this is something that I realized God is not okay with. Like we friends with benefits, like, but I have real feelings for him, but obviously we know Wagwan here, so let me take a step back from this. And how did you feel in that moment? Because I remember coming to your house one day and it was a whole thing where you were just like, I don't understand why you suddenly God and I gotta go to throw to the curb. So how did you feel in that moment? Because I'm sure there's a lot of us who can relate.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, you can imagine you built this bond. Obviously, seeing me, I had come out of a toxic relationship at the time, and yeah, now you come around, and now I'm back to being myself, building that morale, building a relationship with somebody, and then yeah, you just tell me you're done, you can't do it anymore. It was sad, it was shocking. Part of it, I think, it made me realize, and it made me get into this mode of this is exactly why I wanted to stay in my savage mode. Right?
Yikes.
That's all that was clinging in my head. Right?
Yikes.
This is
Yeah.
exactly why I wanted to stay in savage mode. No feelings involved. Just let's do what it do and let's keep it moving.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And so after that time, we were kind of on like a little, we weren't like on a break really, but we like took a step back from like the intensity of things. And so during that time, when I took a step back from Ivan, you started to do your own spiritual journey. So what triggered that for you? And how was that?
Yeah, for me, at the time, actually, once obviously we ended things and all of that, I was going through an internal battle of my own. Obviously, I was out of work for like about 2 years. Um, I was hustling here and there, working at the club, making cash jobs, Ubering at the time because Uber was first in Edmonton. It was hot. No one was doing it.
I remember the Uber
Yeah, I was making
phase. Oh,
lots
I
and
forgot
lots of
about
money
that
doing
one.
Uber,
Yeah.
right? So, but I noticed part of it is like it looked like my finances, one, were not adding up, and I also didn't feel like I was valuable because I'm not working at 9 to 5 kind of thing. It just felt like I was just there, right? So, I remember I seen one of the guys. I knew a guy that I used to go work with in Toronto. So he used to live out here, but I knew he used to go to church. So I asked him what church he went to at the time. So I went over to that church. I went to that Sunday service. But the funny thing is, because of our interactions prior, I think I went to that church about twice my whole life. And then every time I came back from that church, right away I put on Apostle Emmanuel Adewusi Cornerstone Christian Church of God, right? So, and I remember when Apostle was preaching that one Sunday, um, I said, I need to go attend this church. And it's so funny. When you came after going to church, you came over to my house.
Yeah.
I remember you used to reach out, hey, how's your day? How was church? Oh, church, what was church about? What did you learn? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, I didn't learn much. I'm just watching Apostle right now, actually.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, you showed up to my door, and then yeah, I think I had talked to you, okay, if I wanted to come to your church kind of thing. I remember you didn't even send me an invite to come
No,
to church, but I
because I was
remember.
not supposed to be talking with you. So at this time, I found my home church, and like Ivan, I used to call him homeboy. That was my name. Do you remember the homeboy phase? I used to call him homeboy. And so like my spiritual parents, my pastors, they were just like, stop talking to homeboy, focus on your walk with God. And because like I was just sharing, I'm like, oh, every time I go there, I just be throwing it back. I don't know, the back just be throwing up. Like, oh, it just doing it on its own. It's a natural reflex. And so then it's like, take a step back from homeboy. So I was not supposed to be talking to homeboy, but little did they know, after church on Sundays, even though I had broken up, I would still be going to homeboy and doing what I was doing. So I would go to church and we lift our hands in the sanctuary. And I'll go home and say, girl, you look good. What you did? So it was given very interesting. I was not supposed to be talking to him at that time. And so when he started his faith journey and, you know, touring his walk with Christ, and he hit me up like, man, the church is not it for me. Like, you know, I've been watching Apostle because I had to go on a Cornerstone. He was like, I kind of want to come to your church. I was like, this is gonna be interesting because I'm not supposed to be talking to you. How are you gonna come to my church? So I remember I reached out to Apostle at the time. So our Apostle is our pastor per se. And I was just like, hey, man of God. So homeboy wants to come. Can he come? And he was just like, obviously, like, yeah, he can come. And I remember I just said, yeah, you can come. Didn't send him the address. I didn't drop the location. I didn't do nothing. I just left it at that because I was like, I don't want Apostle to know that I was throwing it back with him. I don't want Apostle to know that we were still talking.
See these women?
And so I remember the first time you came to Bible study. Do you remember?
Yeah.
He walked in. When I tell you he was in United States and I was in Canada, like we sat on two different sides of the room. I was fronting like I didn't even know who he was. My friends at the time were like, Shimon, are you okay?
You looked embarrassed that you knew me.
Okay, no, I was not embarrassed that I knew you. So crazy. No, I was not embarrassed that I knew you, but I was just like, I guess I was embarrassed with the fact of like, oh my gosh, like I have not been following the instructions that I had been given, and now he here in the flesh, live and direct, and so obviously Apostle's gonna know.
And I'm guessing at the time also your baby father, you had invited him and he was coming to church.
That
You
part
never
as
told
well.
me, but
That part as well. There's that part as well. So the history of that is I had left my son's father and we were no longer together. But once I gave my life to Christ, I was just like, this co-parenting thing would be so much easier if we were both in the faith. If we were both in Christ, if he was under spiritual authority, like this would be so much easier. So I had tried to bring him into Christ a few times and tried to get him to come to church, but it never worked. And then now a few weeks later, here comes homeboy, pull up the church. I'm like, these church folk gonna think I'm trifling, I'm nasty, I'm whatever. But nonetheless, you came to church, and then the following Sunday, you ended up giving your life to Christ, right?
Yeah.
So you did your own faith journey. You now came. We continued to go to church together for a bit, and then it was throughout that summer that you started to realize that maybe I was the one for you. So explain what that looked like for you.
Yeah, obviously the break we took was very, very necessary.
That was before the break.
No, before me giving my life to Christ and all of that.
Yes, that part, yeah. There's another break, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. We took multiple breaks.
Yeah. Necessary breaks though. They were necessary,
Yeah.
but we'll get to that.
So I think for me, that season, I think it was a season that was necessary.
Yeah.
I remember listening to the word, and I remember what Apostle used to say, you know, when he ends the sermons, try Jesus, try Jesus. So I heard that on the Thursday, but obviously I never tried Jesus, right? And then my very first Sunday at Cornerstone, I heard it again, right? So in that moment, I decided to listen and try Jesus. And I remember the words Apostle he said at the time when he was preaching. He said, try Jesus. And he said, giving your life to Christ doesn't mean it's going to be a flip. He said, if you're smoking, go back to smoking. If you're drinking, go back to drinking. If you're partying, go back to partying. And I just tried Jesus and it just kept doing my thing. I kept working at the club. Like, you know, I kept drinking, I kept partying, and that's how really my journey began.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was during that summer, babe, that you had. I want to know how you came to that point because I remember Apostle had come to me and said, Ivan believes you're his wife and I want you to go and pray with it.
Oh, yeah.
And so this was after broke up, found this. I came to Christ. He came to Christ. We're now at the same church, and we've had past relationships, but we're more so just like we're friends, and we kind of share the same friend group at that point.
Yeah.
But we weren't in a relationship at any means, and
Yeah.
so at that point,
So
you
at
you
the
asked
time,
me.
Apostle, I think it was the Thursday or the Sunday when I first came to Cornerstone,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a father. He
Yeah.
protects his children.
Yeah.
I remember he pulled me aside, had a conversation with me, and yeah, he said, um, "I believe Shimona has communicated that you guys' relationship is done and you guys are strictly friends." And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, sir." But little did he know that the same girl that quote unquote broke up with me was just with me just last week or a couple of days before. So obviously, I'm like, okay, somebody lying to somebody here. So, but obviously, I didn't expose that aspect of things. I just left it be. I gave you your space, and and I let you be you, and I was doing my own thing. And then, yeah, as the weeks went by, actually, I started noticing, and I'm like, man, I started exploring the fact that you really the one. So I remember when I approached the apostle with that, he told me to go pray about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I went to go pray about it, and then at the time also I found out some things. I think you and I had gotten into some disagreements. I had seen certain things, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, God.
I was trying to be a hot girl. I'm just gonna be so for real. Let's just keep it all the way 100. I was talking to the footballers, the Eskimos, the Alaskans. I was doing all of that. At the same time, this man of God is here like, God, I think this is my wife, and I'm at the football game saying, "Go Eskimos!" And so he's looking at me like, "Is this really my wife?"
But
But
when I went
yeah.
into the search of things, for me, when I went into the search of things, I remember the Lord telling me clearly, fight for what you love.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, God, I just seen this and this and this and this. I just seen these messages, and you're telling me this is the woman I'm supposed to be with.
Yeah.
So I was like, nah, this cannot be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, obviously I did my dirty work. You knew I tried my best to be as open with you as possible
Mm-hmm.
about my lifestyle and the kind of lifestyle I lived prior to meeting you.
Yeah.
So you were never caught at a surprise.
Yeah.
Right? And I think I did a great job at that. So yeah, when I saw that and the Lord told me fight for what you love, it was hard.
I can imagine.
It was hard.
Yeah.
So I just honestly I didn't know what that meant at the time, but obviously clearly now I see why.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I didn't know what it meant at the time, but I really just held on, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I communicated that to dad, and I guess the rest is history, and
History.
here
Yeah.
we are.
And so at that time, Apostle had come to me and it was just like, Ivan, so you received your confirmation.
Yeah.
God said this was the one.
Yep.
And that point, Apostle was like, to me, go and pray about it. And I was like, I ain't praying. I'm like, I ain't praying about it. I refused because that was like summer. And I was just like,
Trying to be a hot girl.
I was trying to be a hot girl, but I was trying to be a hot girl in Christ at the same time. So I was talking to people, but I was still trying to navigate my walk with God.
Mm.
And like I just came to the conclusion that Ivan could not be my husband because we had experience, because we had already been together intimately.
I never grew up in the church. I never knew
A lot of
Christ.
things. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of different things where I was just like, there's no way this is my husband. And like as I started like growing in my walk with God and like I was just like, there's no way. Like I just had this preconceived notion that like my husband would have been
A
a
pastor.
pastor. You remember? I was like, I'm marrying a pastor. I'm called into ministry. Oh, period. My husband's a pastor. And I told him that. I was like, my husband's a pastor. You're my husband. And so I refused to pray about it. Months and months went by until I'll never forget this day, and I know you won't forget it either. Our church had a come and see conference, and one of the guest ministers had come, and our conferences were live streamed at the time. And he calls me out, and he's ministering to me and speaking prophetically in different ways. And Ivan's at work because he was working out of town, and this man of God says to me, when do you want to get married? And I'm like, 5 years. And then the reason I said 5 years is because Ivan and I had spoken about that before, and I was like, if we were to ever get married, it'd be in like 5 years' time. And he laughs, and he's just like, ha ha ha, it will happen much sooner than that. And then he comes in my ear, and he's like, the one that you refuse to pray about is your husband. I said, Jesus is Lord. I remember I was shooketh. And then after the fact, I went to my pastor, my spiritual authority. He's like, "Do you still have any questions?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I actually do. I still need to pray about it for myself because again, I had made up my mind that like this was not my husband. I went to God for myself and God again was like, this is your husband. And so from there, that's when the real journey began of us actually dating. And it was a journey at that because, as Ivan had mentioned, he had come out of a toxic relationship. I had come out of a very toxic relationship. Immediately, we had found each other and we had gone through this interesting season of being in the world and trying to navigate being in Christ. So at that time, we were still struggling with sex here and there. We were still struggling with drinking. I remember you used to drink a lot. I would come to your house and be like, "You drink like a fish." Like bottles lined up all over the fireplace and on top of the fridge. And I'd be like, yo, this guy drinks a lot. Like there's a lot of different things that like we were struggling with at the time. But once it was very clear to us that like this is my husband and I'm his wife, we began to take it up to a different level. So at this point is now when we really involve spiritual authority, and began to seek accountability. And so just explain like what that has looked like for you with involving spiritual authority and the vulnerability aspect that it took for us to begin to genuinely grow in laying down our flesh.
What has made it easy is how spiritual authority has made it very easy for me to come to them with anything. They've made it easy through the corrections, through the lessons, through the teachings as well.
Hmm.
And I think also them sharing their own stories as well
Yeah.
makes it a lot easy for a man like me, especially who does not really like opening up to people.
Yeah.
Right? So in times where I fall, in times where I'm mad at you, even up until this day,
Mm-hmm.
I still, if I need to escalate to spiritual authority, I will.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me less of a man,
Come on.
right? It doesn't make me less of a human being. It's really, they're there for that very reason,
Yeah.
right? They're my covering, so I utilize them to the best I can.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before I get into like the rest of this, I actually want you to talk about that
Mm-hmm.
because like one thing that I really admire about you, babe, is your submission to spiritual
Yes,
authority
yes,
and like just the way that you are like led. Allow yourself to be led. Allow someone to tell you where to go, when to come. And
yes.
that's such a blessing as a wife to know that like when I'm having issues, you already know what it is. Like when we will get into disagreements or arguments, I'm like, I'm gonna escalate. I'm gonna escalate. I'm gonna tell our spiritual authority. And it's good because especially as a wife, because you need to know once you're married, as we've learned now and we'll get into, like I'm now under you. You're my authority figure. You can tell me to sit down and stay work from home. You can tell me to quit my job. Like you have full reign over me as my husband.
Yeah.
And so it's such a relief to know that you are under authority because I can always go to the person who you are under, the person who you listen to, who can align you, who can correct you. And for a lot of men, it may feel like, nah, bro, like I don't want to listen to nobody. Nobody's gonna run me like that, like, big boss king, Hugo Boss, like. So how was that easy for you and what would you say to men who are scared of submitting to authority the way that you submit?
Yeah. To be honest, for me, it's a love and honor thing. Um, I grew up honoring my parents, honoring elders, loving elders. Disrespect was not a big thing for me
Mm-hmm.
growing up, and I think part of why I think a lot of people might have challenges with that is because they lack understanding,
Mm-hmm.
right? So for me, I think there's benefits to this, right? Now, I don't really submit because of the benefits, but the benefits make me even more involved in submitting,
Mm-hmm.
right? I submit because I love my spiritual authority.
Mm-hmm.
I love serving them.
Mm-hmm.
I love the direction for my life that they have given me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would be crazy not to submit,
Yeah.
right? And for the men out there, same thing like our spiritual authority says it time and time again. Try Jesus, right? And also try that spiritual authority that the Lord has placed in your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? Until you try something, you can't just sit back and judge and say, okay, this and this and this and this. I'm not doing this because of
Come
this,
on. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's that aspect. Love and honor is a very, very big thing when it comes to spiritual authority.
Yeah.
So for me, until you walk in that, you won't really understand the why you have to submit
Yeah.
and also the benefits of being
Yeah.
under spiritual authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I know the role the spiritual authority has played in this relationship. Like
Yes.
I'll say frankly, if we were not under spiritual authority throughout our even our dating phase, we would not have made it. like we would not, there would not be Mr. and Mrs. Casito. No, there wouldn't. Like there was so much that we were dealing with and going through, and that God was working through in us, that if we did not have authority helping to lead and guide us along the way, we wouldn't have made it. And oftentimes I feel like people feel as though you don't need to submit to that degree until you're married, but there really is a benefit of submitting to spiritual authority from the dating phase, and it will just ease and make the way for you into your marriage. So like for me, some of the key parts of spiritual authority in our relationship was they had recognized that there was a lot of trauma that we both had from the toxic relationships that we had come from, and just, you know, the way in which our nature was at the time. And so they had instructed us to actually go on a break after God had confirmed to us that this was it. And it can seem such like a contradiction to be like, okay, God has now just confirmed this is your husband and this is your wife, and now you're being instructed by spiritual authority to take a break. And so what two questions for you, babe. One, what benefits have you seen from spiritual authority in that dating phase? And also, what was your understanding of, like, how did you feel when we were instructed to go on that break?
Oh yeah. So let's be real.
Yeah.
Going on that break was hard.
Yeah.
Here I am. I had built a great bond with Jay, our
Mm-hmm.
first son. Here I am that now you finally got the confirmation that
Yeah.
I'm your husband.
Yeah.
So let's get this thing going and run with it. But then, yeah, we got to take that break. What really transpired with that break, I don't know if you remember, we fell
Yeah.
into sexual sin again,
Yeah.
right? And there was consequences to that. I
Yeah.
think you got ended up getting pregnant,
Yeah. And I was struggling with anger a lot as well.
and you
There
were
was a lot of
struggling with
different
anger.
sides to it. Yeah.
So, I think part of what also that break helped, because what I actually understood after a couple months after or years later was you had never enjoyed your single season
Mm-hmm.
based on the
Because
conversations.
there was no single
There
season.
was no single
Yeah,
season.
exactly.
Now I had enjoyed my single season.
Yeah,
That's why, certain things I was able to handle them the way I was able to handle them.
exactly.
You had never enjoyed your
Which is
single
exactly
season.
why I was now so enamored with like talking to
Foundation.
guys and doing all these different things despite you
Exactly.
being in the picture. Yeah.
Exactly. Hence why that break, now that God has confirmed, well, there's still some work that needs to be done.
Yes.
You still got to heal from trauma.
Yeah.
I still got to heal from trauma
Mm-hmm.
that I actually didn't even think I had.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that single season, that's that where I think the necessity came from. That's where spiritual authority comes
Mm-hmm.
in.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, you look back and you're like, if that spiritual authority, if that spiritual covering, human covering was not there,
Would I never make it?
a thousand
No, sorry,
percent,
would I never make
a
it?
1000%.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like they played like the biggest role, like the biggest thing I can say of like that shift, and helped pave the way of that pivot from, being, you were the bouncer in the club, I was the party gal, bubbling to the Vibes Cartel, like to go from that that's a whole other story. This guy used to be in the club hawking me from the security booth. Anyways, but to go from that phase to being in Christ, what helped to navigate us along the way was spiritual authority,
100%.
which helped us to make some decisions that we had to put in place. There were some boundaries that we had to put in place, and the accountability aspect. Like any time that we fell, we'd have to let spiritual authority know. And like I remember we had to have some really hard conversations. Okay, why'd you fall this time? And man, I've been like, yeah, I went to her house, man, and she was just wearing that dress. And I've also like, so maybe if he's coming over, Shimona, don't wear the little mini dress for your dad wear, right? Or maybe, if you guys are really struggling, don't do this or don't do that. And it was just wise counsel that helped us to, tear down some of the norms for us of what was normal.
Walking you to your apartment door.
Yeah.
I remember I used to leave my car in the lobby, walk you upstairs, and then a part of it would be like, man, you go up there, you're done. And I remember, see, one thing leads to the other.
Go on.
I don't know. I could have just stayed in the lobby, watched you get into the elevator, just called you, and then just made sure you're in your apartment,
Yeah.
right? But I used to park my car, walk you into the lobby, take the elevator upstairs, carrying your purses and whatever you had, and then I remember there was a time we actually kind of paused and I was handing you the stuff,
Yeah.
and then you opened the door and I actually kept holding it. No, 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 let me put it inside. And I found my way inside the house. And
Yeah.
obviously,
One thing led
one
to
thing led
another.
to another. And
Yeah.
then the sleepovers, there's a discipline aspect to this thing,
Yeah.
but we didn't realize that until after the
After.
fact.
Yeah.
But again, this is where spiritual authority comes into play, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, exactly. They helped us make some of those hard decisions.
yeah.
And so at this point, after I had gotten pregnant, and then, we end up did getting an abortion. That's a whole other conversation. You were right there by my side during that season. Like we had gone through so much together. And so at that point we were now instructed that okay, y'all need to take a break from each other because you have healing to do, I have healing to do, and there needs to be a break. And so at that point, I remember we had a WhatsApp chat. And this was just another like boundary that our like a safety net that our spiritual authority had put in place. Because at that point it was like no communication. You guys are on a break. You're not together, and they put some boundaries in place with that. One of them was that we need to have a distinguished time frame of the break because if it was just you're just on a break until whenever until you guys are healed, I don't think we would be here today because that's just a lack of wisdom. You're taking a 3 month break.
3 months, we can't see each other one on one.
It had to be at
The
church.
only time we only see each other is at church, right?
We can have a
So
phone call once a month for an hour.
once a month phone call for
Yeah.
an
And our
hour.
spiritual authority made us do what? Apostle wrote it up on a contract. Do you remember? He
So the
wrote up
contract
he
was
wrote up
signed.
everything and
Yeah.
he signed, I can sign, I said, I was like, geez, this is so serious. But
Yeah.
again, it was just an aspect of like
Accountability.
let your word be bond and let this be accountability because we
Yeah.
realized that we were struggling.
Yeah.
And after that break, we came back and it was like two completely different people.
Yeah. Yeah.
God had done like a complete work in us within that time frame. And from there, everything just began to speed up.
Yeah, and actually, I think what made that break great for me was I got a word for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, I had already seen you through the abortion, which is very, very hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time, I used to tell myself, what kind of man am I that I can't even say no to sex?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was my thought when I saw you go through that abortion.
Yeah.
Right? So when we took that break, I made a vow to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I made a vow. This is something I had talked about with my spiritual father because I heard him make a vow to himself.
Yeah.
I think in one of the sermons. So I made a vow to myself that if I ever slept with you before I married
Yeah.
you,
That'd be it.
I don't care how much money I done spent on the ring.
Yeah.
I was done with you.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember the way these things work, an opportunity came up.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when we took the flight to Miami, meet family, and we were on the beach, and obviously,
Miami.
I had always wanted to have sex on the beach, but obviously that's crazy things you come up as a teenager, right? So, opportunity arose.
Yeah.
I remember you were pushing, pushing, pushing.
It was
What did
that.
I tell you?
It was
And I remember I had to stop you, and I told you, Shimona, if we do this right now.
yes.
Once we get home back
That's
to
it.
Edmonton, I'm done with
That's
you.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And I thank God for that word because that word held me down.
Yeah.
To be out of the country exactly in the same spot where I always desired to be and do what he do
Yeah.
and still stand strong. It was not easy,
Yeah.
but I'm so happy and
Yeah.
grateful that I held on to that word that I
Yeah.
got when we got
100%.
that break.
Yeah,
So
100%. And like it just reminds me of the scripture, like when one is weak, the other is there to pick them up. Because there were
100%.
times where like I'm not gonna lie, y'all, my flesh was weak. Like I'm sorry, my man is fine. I'm sorry I'm attracted to this man who's going to be my husband. Like I'm sorry I'm in Miami where the weather is nice and he's looking good. Like I'm sorry, And so there was times where the spirit was willing, but the flesh was weak. And
Yeah.
he stood his ground on principles. And there was times where Ivan would come and be looking at me a little crazy, but I would stand on my principles. And so we always what helped us really was those principles. It was the decisions that we made. It was the accountability. And it was always not being afraid to run back to Christ. Like there were times where we stumbled and we had fallen before you making that decision. Cause I believe that was nearing our engagement phase where you're like, listen, baby girl, if we slip up and we fall into this, things are done. And but prior to that, like we were never afraid to repent. We were never afraid to come back to Christ, despite the conviction that we felt of the things that we were struggling with. We never were like, oh well, now we done messed it up. Da, 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 da. We never got to the point where we felt too dirty or too gross to not come back to Christ. We always knew that there was always room for
That's why
forgiveness.
Jesus is Jesus. You come as you are, regardless of who you are, regardless of where you are.
Yes, babe.
Right. So,
100%. Yeah. And so then nearing our engagement phase after this, and we had gotten a lot better with, some of the things that we were struggling with. We had made those decisions. We had stopped having sex before marriage, and now we were just growing in
good two
Christ.
years.
Yeah, it was about 2 year period. So it's
Abstinence. It's
it's
possible.
possible.
I
That's what I'm
remember.
trying to
I
say.
remember we were telling it. You were saying, I don't think I could do it. You always hit
Yeah.
me with, babe, one more time, one more time.
Not you exposing.
We gonna be
That's
authentic
so
here.
crazy.
You used to hit me with, babe, just this one time.
Yeah.
That's with this one last time. No, no.
Yeah.
And we went a good solid years
Yeah.
without sex.
Yeah.
So
It was two
that's when
years.
I knew
It's
it's
possible. It's
possible.
possible.
It's
And especially
possible.
from like the degree of like where we were at, like
Yes.
I like it would be given like multiple times a day. It would be given, we would leave, go to the car, run back in the house. Like it was, we were having fun. We were enjoying ourselves. And so to go from that degree and that level of bond, like it got to the point where we were together like almost every day at one point, right? Like you would pick me up from work, we would go get chicken wings on my lunch break. Like we were together.
Wow.
Do you remember those days? Yeah, the chicken wings. And so like we were together at like almost every point. And so to go from that is what I really want to hone in on here is just like where we were to the point of being able to be like 2 years before marriage, make up our mind that this is not happening. It's those key decisions and those key principles to know there really is hope and it really is possible, despite of like where you've been or what you've known so far in your relationship. But as you know, hubby has spoken, it's those key aspects of like accountability, submitting to authority as a man. Like there's nothing wrong with submitting to authority as a man. It's actually like a sign of humility, and it really is actually a sign of strength to be able to allow somebody to tell you when to go and when to come and not what to do. So we were in that season, things buckled down, and I want to talk about the engagement season aspect and when you knew that it was time to get engaged and when you knew that now was the right time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Part of the teachings we've been taught, a man, when you're ready for marriage, right?
Hmm.
You gotta be able to provide. You gotta be under spiritual
Also
authority,
authority,
and you also gotta have a vision
vision.
for
Yeah.
your life,
Hmm.
right? Clear, concise. And
Hmm.
I knew at the time. I'm like, I was good. I was able to provide. I was under spiritual. I had the vision for my life,
Hmm.
right? I was ready, set, go.
Hmm.
So, and obviously, since I figured I was ready and everything was in place for me, because with the women, we've been taught a woman only needs one thing. She
Submit.
only needs to be ready. She has to be ready to submit.
Yeah.
That's when we know she's ready for marriage,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? All these other things the world puts in place. Oh, you got to get your finances right, blah, blah, blah. Just be ready to submit
Yeah.
to the husband God has ordained for you, right? So, like I said, for me, I had those three things in place and I was ready to go. And obviously, the first thing first was going to ask for permission,
Yeah.
right? As a man, you do not go put a ring on someone's daughter without asking the parents. So I went to Apostle and Pastor Buchan and I asked. Then I went to Mom and I asked as well,
Hmm.
right? And then I took him out for dinner. We had those conversations. I got the blessing. Everything was good. They were in agreement, and boom, I approached.
Yeah. And the rest was
The
really
rest was
was really
history.
history from
Yeah.
there. And like he had just spoken about the aspect of like as a woman you have to be ready to submit. I was ready, but I was incredibly terrified, if you remember.
Mhm.
And like I think I've spoken about that before. Like I like, once we got engaged and as we were nearing marriage, I was incredibly, incredibly terrified to submit. That I don't think we ever talked about this. Like, did that ever affect or phase you in any way? Like how vocal I was? Like I remember we were in our marriage counseling and Apostle had said, once you get I remember I'd asked a question, I was like, oh, but like once we get married, you're my authority, right? And he's like, actually, Shimona, once you get married, your husband takes precedence over me. Y'all, I'm not gonna front. We were actually just like this on the chair in the room, and I turned and I looked at him and I go, I just started bawling my eyes out, like not just like a few tears. I was bawling and I was looking at him crazy, like you're about to run and dictate my life, like you're about to be ahead of me in that way, and I was absolutely terrified because for again the history of what we've had and how I knew Ivan, like it had caused me fear to be like, how is this man going to lead me like that? And that leads me to another
Which
point that
was
I want.
valid,
It was
right?
valid. Another thing
100%.
that I was really afraid of, and something that I was very vocal about as well, is like I was a bit further advanced in my walk with God and in my spirituality at the time, and I felt like, how is he going to lead me when I'm more spiritual than him? How is this man going to lead me when I am deeper in the things of Christ than him? How is he going to lead me in any way in prayer and such if I'm feel as though I'm here spiritually? I remember like our spiritual father would always tell me like, once you get married, he'll catch up. And I'd just be like, "Yeah, I just don't see that." But I've actually come to see that now. Like
Praise God.
you've surpassed me spiritually, and it's shocking to me, but it's like shocking in the best way possible. But my question for you, babe, is like, did it ever affect you or phase you in any way, like how vocal I was with my fear of submission? And like, how did you navigate that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, affect me, yes and no.
Yeah.
You know, I think the vocal was good. It was good on your part because for me as a man, I don't want to be with somebody that's not expressing how they are.
Yeah.
If you're going through something, especially our lovely women,
Mm-hmm.
especially you, I want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
As men, obviously, naturally, we built just to suppress our feelings and do what they do. And obviously, the Lord is helping a lot of us men to start opening up more,
Yeah.
right? But as a woman, yeah, definitely. I think that right there is just who you are, really,
Yeah.
right? So I didn't. If you had become somebody else and not expressed yourself, especially how you felt, then I think we would have lots of bigger challenges
Yeah.
now,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you didn't vocalize it then, especially since we're in the marriage counseling phase,
Yeah.
where exactly you're supposed to do just that,
Exactly.
open up with everything, bring everything to the table. So I think the space, one of the first thing, the space we were in was perfect for you to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right? You didn't do it in front of your friends. You didn't do it in front of my friends. You did it during our marriage counseling sessions, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why we had those marriage counseling sessions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like submission has turned out to be, I always say like submission is the pathway to a soft life, babe. Submission to your husband is the pathway to us off. I'm enjoying myself. My nails stay did. Like everything, like every aspect of me is so taken care of. And if you remember, babe, I was actually having a conversation with someone a few weeks ago, and she had said to me, "Do you remember?" I was just like, she said to me like my appearance, like how I present myself, actually ministers to her. And she's like, "How do you stay so kept?" And I'm just like, "Yes, my husband takes care of me, but I also said, but my God takes better care of me." And that is an aspect of submission to both your human authority, like as my husband, but also submission to Christ. And so submission, I really want to speak to the ladies. Like submission is a beautiful thing. It is a pathway to a soft life. It is a pathway to the life that you desire. And your submission is literally the key to everything that you are looking for. But yeah, and I think from that, like the rest is history. We got married, and marriage is a whole different ballpark in itself. We're nearing 4 years now, and it's just the journey continues. But I know one thing that our spiritual parents talk about during like our engagement season was that like you have to know that this is the person for you, and you need to know for yourself that God said this is your partner, because there will be times once you are married where you feel like, what is like
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
what really are going here, like feel like, is this really the person for me? Did I make a
Yep.
mistake? And I
Yep.
know you felt that way and I felt that way before, is because we've had those conversations where I'm
Mhm.
like, this is the ghetto, like what is this, right?
Mhm.
But we
Where you scream and shout.
yes, exactly. We've had those seasons where there's literally the first few years of our marriage, babe, let's be so for real. We almost didn't make it.
Yeah.
We almost didn't make it. Like, let's just be so for real. I threw out the D word a few times. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think I can do this
I think
anymore.
I think it was we were 3 months into the marriage.
Yes, and I was like,
You
I can't
were
do this.
and you were we got into a disagreement
Yeah,
over something so stupid.
yeah,
And the first thing that came out of your mouth was the word divorce.
divorce. Yeah,
And you had already known how I feel about that
yeah,
word, because that's one thing I said our marriage would never end up in.
yeah,
Right? So I felt you speaking like that, that being your automatic response,
yeah,
I felt you're speaking death
yeah.
to our marriage.
Oh yeah, come
Right?
on.
That this is why I'm so happy I stood firm.
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember this, but I said you're not going anywhere, and
yeah.
I walked away.
You know you're mad that this gets even worse. Now I'm like, what are you talking to?
I told you, divorce who, divorce what? You're not going anywhere, and I walked away. Right?
Yeah,
And so, and obviously, I did escalate to spiritual
spiritual
authority
authority.
because, bruh, like, what do you mean
What
you
are you
get it?
doing? Yeah,
Obviously, I knew you just talking smack, but at the same
it was a
time,
huge trauma
the
response.
reality
Yeah,
of that actually being like spoken to my
yeah,
face
yeah.
3 years into marriage.
Not even 3 years, 3 months.
Yeah,
Yeah,
3 months.
yeah.
Sorry, 3 months into marriage was crazy,
Crazy. Yeah,
right? So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it comes back like you'll have those moments where I'm sure you felt the same way before that you're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but you never vocalize it. Me,
No.
I'm very vocal. I used to be just very open mouth, like I would just speak whatever, say whatever. I don't care. I would just say whatever I had to say. But obviously, as we've grown, like I've learned that. But the thing that has held me in this marriage now and in this season, because those seasons will come where you feel like,
Mhm.
God, is this really your perfect will for me? It's the fact that I heard from God for myself. I didn't hear from a pastor. I didn't just hear from, a spiritual authority. I didn't just hear it from anybody. I heard for myself directly from God, and He confirmed to me that this is my husband. So when those storms of life are blowing, when life is lifing and things in the marriage look rocky, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I am in the perfect will of God, and this is the person God has for me, and that we have no option but to get through it. Did it take
Absolutely.
time for me to get there? Oh, 100%. Because at first, everything it was fight or flight. It was fight or flight. And more than often, I was
Trauma.
trying to
Trauma,
flight,
right?
but it was a trauma
Yeah,
response. But as
trauma
I've
response.
grown in this marriage and in my understanding of, the spiritual aspect of marriage as well, I'm like, there's no back door to this. There's nowhere I'm going. And even for you as well, it's coming back to that. Like, there's times where I'm like, babe, like, or you remember early on, I was like, babe, are you sure about this? And you would always be like, I heard from God. I know what God said.
We already married and you're asking me
And
if I
go
should.
on, go on. And
Uh,
so,
yeah,
but like you
yeah,
knew and
yeah.
you heard for yourself
Oh
as
yeah,
well that
oh
this
yeah,
is what God said.
oh
There's
yeah.
no other option.
And as a man, I'm not gonna respond to that kind of noise, right? Especially as a head,
Come
right?
on. Yeah.
You put that ring on, you asked her, you proposed to her, so you must have heard,
Yes.
right? You must have heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
You weren't there when God was speaking to me.
Yeah.
Nobody else was.
Yes.
It was
It was
just me
God.
and God,
Exactly.
right? So if I heard from God, I know my God. I know what He has brought me through.
Hmm.
I know the healing He has brought in my life.
Yeah.
I know the passage, the pathways He has brought me through
Hmm.
to where I'm at right now. I
Yeah.
know where I was
Hmm.
prior to me getting married.
Hmm.
So if my God speaks and He brings me to exactly where I want, and then I'm getting outside noise, then what are we really doing?
Yeah.
This is where, as a head,
Hmm.
you really have to move
Hmm.
and operate as the head.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're my helper.
Yeah.
You're not the head of this marriage. You're
Yes.
not the head of this family.
Come
It is
on.
not your responsibility.
Yeah.
You're here to help me.
Helpmates.
You're my
Helpmates.
helper,
Through and through.
right? So, meaning if I make decisions and they affect the family, that's my
Yeah.
responsibility.
Hmm.
Are you allowed to make decisions on my behalf? 1,000%, right? But I'm the head, and when things like that come up, like you said, when one is weak,
The other one pick them up. Yeah, babe. So like last notes as we wind up this episode. I think this has been my longest episode yet, but I mean our story is anything but traditional. What would you say to the men who are where you were in our dating phase? Or what, like, like if you could go back and talk to Ivan at that point in time who had just given his life to Christ and, had still been with the sex, with the drinking, with all of that. What would you say to them holistically, authority, submission, the grace of God, and just about the decisions? Like, look on the camera and I talk to the man them.
yeah. So brothers out there, understand that you're not in this by yourself. There's lots and lots of people that have done it before you. But one thing I gotta really tell you is find Jesus. Try Jesus. A lot of you are watching this, and a lot of you know who I was back then, where I was, and how I was operating or moving. But a lot of you don't know the new me. You only see what you see. But I cannot have done it without trying Jesus. I'll stress that again. Try Jesus, and then after you try Jesus, go back to do exactly what you were doing. Do whatever you were doing, party, drink, and as time goes by, Jesus will do exactly what he needs to do and prune you and help you quit that club job like he did for me. I just woke up and quit it, right? But also, do not judge situations based on what you've been through, right? See the situation, assess the situation, and have those open conversations rather than judging. Now, had I judged the situation and said, "Oh, I'm done, I'll never date single women," I would have missed out on my destiny helper, right? So it's those situations that you're in. Had she not been open to the fact that I am able to lead her based on the help from God, right? Had she been closed off with the fact that I am going to be her husband, then she would have missed out on the best man that ever stepped into her life,
Amen.
right? So once again, try Jesus, have open conversations, do not judge situations based on past experiences, have those open conversations, and the rest will be history.
Per. Big period. Mic drop on them, baby. All right. But that is it, y'all. That is today's episode. This has been a blessing to me. We actually had some conversations that we haven't had before. So, yeah, this was good. Maybe I'll just bring him on the pod all the time when I want him to talk a little more, you know? But no, this was good, y'all. But thank y'all for rocking with us. This was a huge blessing. Thank you, V, for coming and I sit down on the Certain Seasons couch. Yes, thank you. Usually he's behind the camera taking all my photos, helping me out in that way. But this was time for this. So yeah, we must garden look a high five on them. Yeah, man, I saw a dog one. All right, Certain Seasons, y'all. Thanks for rocking with your girl, and thank you for rocking with my boo. As just always, we are back in another 2 weeks for another episode. Until then, follow us on IG, TikTok, and all the kingdom at South End Seasons. Connect with me, message me, DM me. I love to hear from y'all. But aside from that, we'll be back in another 2 weeks to rock out again. Love y'all. Peace in. Peace in.